of the year. Thank you, Lindsay. And today we're going to do a little bit of an overview type meeting, but also we hope to engage in a lot of discussion. So feel free to ask questions at any time, throw your questions in the chat, raise your hand, whatever. We're here for talking with you all about Symbiota and all the portals that are represented by it. So let me go ahead and get my screen all set up here. Okay, well, welcome to Symbiota Support Group, January 2023. I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to make some important announcements for you all.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the first support group meeting of the year. It's exciting. We've done now a full year of this meeting and everybody's here to kick it off for 2023. So thanks for showing up. So the first thing I want to announce is it's kind of a question. So if you're going to conferences this year, it would be great if there's anyone out there who would like to spread the word about their portal. So we have some pre-made posters or can make posters about your portal if you want to take them to a conference. Let us know. So here's some examples. So we have one, for example, for the Tarita portal, we have one for the algae portal, and one for the Southern Rocky Mountain herbaria. But like we could totally make more of these if this would be of interest to people. So, if you're going to a conference anyway, this is probably a fairly easy thing to like put up because we'll make most of it for you. And of course, you'd be welcome to edit it, like if you want to change it up on the poster, but we kind of have a template. So reach out, let us know if this is something that might be of interest to you. Another thing that's coming up this year, so you might remember from 2022, we did a series of 6 portal advancement campaigns. So these are campaigns that are designed to kind of reinvigorate digitization in your community, or if you need to like wrap up a TCN, for example, other portals do want to do campaigns for that reason. So if your portal could benefit from a portal campaign, now is a great time to reach out and contact us about it because we haven't solidified the schedule for 2023 yet. So if you're thinking that could be useful to your portal community, reach out to help@symbiota.org. Other announcements is that we've been continually fixing bugs in the Symbiota code base, 2 of which are listed here, and that's something that kind of is ongoing, and code in your portal will get refreshed as bugs are fixed. So thank you to our developers for helping make that happen. Katie, do you want to elaborate on any of those bugs? Do you know more about them?
No, not really. Just letting people know that we're seeing all those issues coming in, and we're trying to knock them out, squash those bugs.
Thanks. And then we also wanted to make a little announcement. We have a page on our website about Symbiota communications. So we just want to let everyone know, like if you're an admin for a collectionist Symbiota portal, you're probably already subscribed to our email communications, but other people might want to subscribe as well. So for example, we send out monthly reminders about this meeting, and anybody is welcome to come to this meeting. So if they would also like to get the reminders about this meeting, you click on this link, or we can post it in the chat. There's a Google form you can fill out and get added to the email list. So we just want to let everybody know, people can sign up for this if they want to. There's also a little FAQ about what happens if you aren't receiving emails from us, but you think you should be. Sometimes there are issues with like institutional firewalls, or maybe you need to add an email to your contacts list just to make sure that like we become a trusted contact. So these emails like actually end up in your inbox. Oh, and another announcement, just in case anyone knows anybody, or if there are any software engineers in the room, we're looking for a software engineer to help make Symbiota even better. So the full details to this job advert is in this link below. We can post that in the chat as well. Just, spread the word if you happen to know somebody who might, want to join the team. This would be through ASU. I think that's it from the hub. Are there other announcements from people in the room? That's okay too. Oh, thanks, Nico. Nico just posted the job in the chat. All right, Katie, is this where you want to pick up?
Sure thing. All right, so as I mentioned in the very beginning, today we're going to be doing a little bit of a retrospective and then also forward thinking, hopefully involving some discussion about what you guys would like to see from this meeting, and then also talking about the hub and the Symbiota code itself. So 2022 was a big year for Symbiota. We accomplished a lot of things thanks to being part of IDIG Bio. We were able to bring in and assemble this whole team. And we are now an associate node in GBIF, as you might have heard. So what this means is that we have kind of formally joined with GBIF in our goals being, they're very aligned as they are, our goals being to mobilize as much biodiversity data as possible. So we are working closely with them. Anything that you publish in a Symbiota portal can likely be published in GBIF, which is a global aggregator of biodiversity data. So if you want to learn more about that, please go to Symbiota Docs or reach out to help. We are more than happy to help you get your data moved to Symbiota or moved up to GBIF so that they can be available to a broader resource. We've also been able to outreach at multiple conferences in 2022. So we had people at the Spinach meeting in Edinburgh, BioDigicon, the Digital Data Conference, the Biodiversity Information Standards Conference. So stay tuned for where we'll be next. We also have a much more elaborate help and tutorials website than has previously been. And we've been able to add to this guide with lots of information about how to navigate websites as a user, how to edit your Symbiota portal, edit your collection in the Symbiota portal, administrate it, etc. That being said, we know that it's not fully comprehensive yet. So if there are any documentation portions that you think are missing, then we're happy to work on those. And we'll show you how to submit that feedback in our GitHub repository later on. We also have a YouTube channel that you've probably seen, hopefully, and a lot of those videos are also linked into Symbiota Docs, so that's useful. But if you're looking for a particular YouTube video, then you can go to our YouTube channel itself. And then we have our GitHub repository where we're tracking all these new ideas that people come to us with. So people will often say, hey, it would be really nice if this tool did that. And because there are many, many people who are affected by such changes and there's only so much time in the day, we can't necessarily enact all those things immediately. And often they will require a little bit more discussion or figuring out how it's actually going to function. So we really encourage people to put those issues as feature requests in our Symbiota Docs GitHub repository. And again, we'll probably show that closer to the end of the meeting, reminding everyone how to submit those issues and discussions and such. And I just wanted to point out that we are working on these. 46 of these so far have been closed. So we're actively going through and trying to figure out what's going to be the most useful for the community and then acting on those. And then also part of this GitHub repository is a community discussion board. And this is, again, for ideas. It can be a place where you discuss ideas. It can be a place where you ask the Symbiota community as a whole, not just the Symbiota support hub, questions about how people are using their Symbiota portals. And that can be more useful because we know our code and we know how people are using our code somewhat, but we don't know how everyone is using the code and how everyone is using their portals. So putting those questions out to the broader community can be helpful. Just some progress, some things that we've been able to achieve this year. We are serving 20 TCNs and 54 portal communities. That includes the 40 or so portals that are hosted at Arizona State, but also many other portals who are hosted in different institutions. So we can help people like with the Bell Atlas, and we can help people with the MICO portal, even though they aren't necessarily hosted here at ASU. We've helped mobilize 91 million occurrences, and those are just from ASU hosted portals. 44 million images, over 1,700 collections can be found in Symbiota-based portals. 18 million occurrences are sent to GBIF from Symbiota portals. There have been 15 million edits in Symbiota portals in 2022 alone. And we've been able to conduct 6 portal campaigns and 12 support group meetings so far. So we're getting moving and shaking with this. These were the 6 portal campaigns that we were able to run for these herbarium-based and mycology and macroalgae herbarium-based collections. And again, if you have a need or you see a need for a portal that you're working with, then we're happy to help coordinate a portal campaign for that portal. These are just some accomplishments from the portal campaigns. We've added 11 collections to Symbiota portals. 28 collections are newly publishing to GBIF, and we're also able to add 1.78 million occurrences to Symbiota portals, and we're able to do a bunch of other data cleaning things. So really great progress is being made through these portal campaigns, and these too could be points of progress that we can help with your portal if you have not already contributed to or participated in a portal campaign. So again, let us know. And also, this is not just things that the Symbiota support group or Symbiota support hub are doing. Natural history collections are doing a ton of work. You guys are killing it. And we just wanted to acknowledge how much you guys are making this happen. So just in the Symbiota portals that are hosted at ASU, you all have added 2.6 million records in this last year, and that's only of live managed collections. So this is only the ones who are using Symbiota-based portals as their content management systems. So huge, huge, huge progress, you guys. And 2.1 million images, again, only live managed collections in 2022. I'm sure that number would be twice as much if we included snapshots too, but again, you guys are killing it. So I want to acknowledge all the work that you are all doing. Okay, any questions about this kind of state of 2022 before we move on? And the next part will be a little bit more discussion based. Okay, well, let's look forward to 2023. So as I mentioned, we were at some conferences this last year, and will be at some conferences this next year too. So if you are going to any of these conferences, and more will probably pop up as well, then look for a Symbiota support hub person, because there probably is going to be someone there. So if you want to drag your laptop over to us and say, hey, how do I do this? We're there for it. So let us know if you have any questions, and we're happy to talk to you at any of these conferences. We already mentioned that portal campaigns are upcoming in 2023. So put your, I don't know, hand in the chat if you're thinking about a portal campaign for your portal. We would love to put some on the schedule. And then we want to hear from you all about what you want to see in the Symbiota support group. Are there any particular topics that you'd like covered? They can be topics that are, very minute, like how do I work with these tools, or they can be broader ideas that are maybe not covered in the Symbiota docs, like how would you, include barcoding, workflow, and involve that in your Symbiota portal. So we're really happy to answer whatever questions that you guys have, and if there's any particular needs, we would love to hear some ideas. So I'm just going to close down the presentation for a moment and see if there are any ideas or requests that people would like covered in future meetings. No one yet? '23 has been a slow start for me too. Christy, yeah.
I regret that this may have already been covered someplace else, but when I hire students to do uploads to actually input data, I don't have yet great training materials. Like embarrassingly, I print the page of my portal and highlight the fields and write what I need them to do. And I intend to create better training materials, but I'm wondering if there's a place where people have already put their own training materials and I can't create 2 or 3 hour videos for them. They're not, it's a 6-month job. It's a 12-month job. So I wonder if there's a place where people already have training materials that I can pirate, or if when I finally do create training materials, I can put them there for other people, or if these places exist that are simple and easy.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that many TCNs have created materials. So Megan just put in the chat that she has some materials she could share with you. I know the Consortium of California Iberia has some materials that are publicly available, including, I think, like a data entry video. I'm pretty sure the global TCN has developed some good protocols, or at least has them all in one place. So I think Miranda's here and she might be able to speak to that. But let me pop in the chat, at least the California Phonology Network TCN, where those are.
But I also know we're each going to have different protocols.
Exactly, yeah.
Like amendable.
I know that the ones in the California Phonology Network, those are Word documents, so you could edit those as you need to. I'm sure the videos you would have to decide if they're useful enough, but it depends on if you're doing herbarium entry or entry of all sorts of different taxa. And then Frank just put a link to lichen-based resources too. But yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think iDigBio is trying to work on that, and also in association with the Society for the Preservation of Natural History Collections, their wiki page, but their wiki page is kind of more best practices rather than like a clearinghouse of protocols. So yeah, that's a great question.
The other question I have is iDigBio has a really cute little video on their homepage about kind of selling the concept of why we do this, that I generally make people watch when they're new to the whole process. And also if like a teacher is bringing a high school class or a teacher is bringing a intro to biology college class. But I wonder if there's other material that's like public consumption of why we do this. If those videos or materials like why digitize collections, I mean, it's easy for me to give that spiel that's 5 or 10 minutes long, but it'd be great if there were other videos for public consumption of why we do this other places.
Yeah, I would look on iDigBio and maybe reach out to their education and outreach and diversity and inclusion people, because I know that they've developed kind of marketing resources. I don't know to what extent, but. Any other questions or topics you'd like covered in Symbiota support group meetings?
Can you tell us if this is going to be a recurring meeting on the second Monday of the month at noon, just so I can get it in my calendar?
It has normally been the first Monday at noon, but because of the new year, we just moved this one. And I think that we're going to keep it there unless there's some public outcry that it needs to be moved, which we're happy to move it. Just this seems to fit many people's schedules.
Thanks.
No problem. Anyone else?
I'll post in the chat what all the meetings are right now. Some of them might move potentially, but they should by and large be on the schedule. But I'll put it in the chat, so if you want to like get it in your calendar, it's there.
And just as a way of jogging your memory, here are the topics we have already covered. So if there were any that you were like, oh yeah, I remember that I wanted to hear more about XYZ after we talked about this particular topic, we'd be interested to hear that. Thanks for that note, Diana. We will probably be rescheduling that Labor Day one. Okay, well, please do, as something comes up or if we receive a lot of questions about something, we're happy to lead a discussion on that. And this doesn't necessarily have to be a time where you sit down and we teach you something. It could be a time when you ask questions about a particular thing. We're happy to do screen sharing. If you're working on a specific problem, we're also happy to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be webinar style format. We're here for what needs to be done.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I know there is some talk about like basically not registering, but like basically giving the collectors an ID, and like there's supposed to be a database that we could access online where there would be like a little autobiography, and then that ID would be used. So if someone changes their name, then, you know, the collector names could be batch updated. Is that something related to you guys and that you guys are going to adopt, or?
I can speak to what I think you're talking about. Currently, if you have a login or when you have a login with a portal, you can provide an Orcid ID number. So Orcid, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, is kind of like a global registry of researchers. I think anyone can register there. But if you go to Orcid and you register, and then you get an Orcid ID number, and that's kind of like your personal GUID or personal global unique identifier. And then you can put that in your account so that if you needed to rename yourself or change your email address or whatever, then that Orcid ID will still be associated with your name.
Okay.
So there's that, and then in the future, kind of future casting, we're hoping to include some newer developments that people have been making toward attaching identifiers to collectors and other agents who are in the data, identifiers and collectors, much like what Arctos currently does. I don't have a timeline on that or whether that's next in the development queue, but I think that is kind of the future of collection management systems, is being able to assign identifiers to those agents, those people who are doing things.
Okay. Yeah, because we have a couple collectors where it's like whenever you're batch editing, it's like they change their name or something like that. And so it becomes a little messy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if they're using their username versus their name.
Well, one of them, like, it just starts whenever I'm trying to batch.
Oh, I think they're still cut out.
Full name. So it's a whole thing. But okay, well, that's good to know. For Orcid, can you see other people's Orcid IDs? So if like someone's registered and like I know they're registered and their record is being entered into Cernak, that we can enter it there? Or is it like strictly just for like one person?
You can search in the Orcid website for other people. Often there are people with the same name, so you have to figure out if you can confirm that it's that person that you expected it to be. But there currently is not really a way of assigning that Orcid to a collector or an identifier, only with someone who has an account in the portal.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
No problem. Mario has a question. Is there a way to generate code automatically for each new specimen entered? Mario, can you explain what you mean by code, like a QR code, or?
wonder if they mean catalog number.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if you could clarify that question in the chat, Mario, that will be great. We'll keep on looking at that. Any other questions or topics?
Well, to that comment from Mario, maybe what he's referring to, in Symbiota, you get a GeoID if it's a live collection, right? And so that uniquely identifies automatically each record. So that is already implemented. I don't know whether that is what he's looking for.
Oh yeah, potentially. Mario, if you mean like a global unique identifier, that is generated automatically for every specimen if you're live managed.
I had another question. If
Okay.
So since the tag name got added, so it used to be catalog number and then other catalog number, and now we can add that, like, what's the tag name? Is there a way to batch edit so that all of ours, like, you know, say like our institution accession number? Because I was trying to figure out, because when it downloads the tag name number, so I wasn't sure how to deliver that phrase in front of it.
Yeah, there's currently not a way to do that batch in the front end, but that is something that we can apply as the hub. So if you say like, hey, all of these collections, we want this in front of the other catalog number, then we can populate that for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, and then another question for you all. Is there anything needed in terms of documentation or tutorials? Are there any gaps that you see in the Symbiota docs? Or are there videos that you feel would be helpful? You know, overviews or walkthroughs?
I have a question about this. This is Allison from the UC Davis Herbarium. I was a little shocked to learn from our colleague David Giblin at University of Washington about the reason why the Pacific Northwest Consortium had been down for weeks, which was that the host institution, the Burke Museum, had a ransomware attack, and they're having to, David's group had to buy a new server and reload all their software, and discovered in the process that some of their images had, the metadata had been lost since last April. And it made me realize that he said that that was something to do with the host institution and they were gonna fix it. And I'm not worried about our group consortium level security. That's in very good hands, I understand from Caitlin. But as a herbarium here, I'm wondering about like maybe what we should know at our level about security, like you know, we're dealing with backing up images, assuming our university department servers are properly backed up, but maybe we shouldn't be relying on that, and maybe we should be downloading our data because we're live periodically and squirreling that away. So just sort of, since a lot of us don't have computing background or data management background, like I'd be kind of curious to know like what I should be thinking about and worrying about here at the image and data generation level.
Yeah, I don't know if we can give you any firm answers on that as the hub, but just as a general rule, the more copies, the better. And I think the industry standard is usually 3 different copies and in at least 2 physically different locations. So don't do 3 copies on Google or 3 copies in one specific place. You should have them in 2 completely different places. That's my understanding of the kind of IT standards. And that's what Megan says right there. More than one backup of images is useful too, I would say essential.
So I guess I'm interested in 2 things specifically, how often to back up like just the label data. We have our images backed up, but the metadata, the label data isn't something I've thought about until now. And how often do maybe people here can suggest how often to back it up? And then there's this other discussion that's been going on about what types of images to store, whether we store the original raw file or just our own copy of the JPEG that goes to Cyverse. We've been trying to think of a case, like we've been doing this for a few years, and we have never had a case where we needed to refer back to the original raw file, and that's very large and becoming very expensive. And so we're thinking about ditching that and just keeping a backup copy of the JPEG. But I'd be curious to know what people here think about that strategy, or like what strategy you have for image storage.
In terms of the label data, I would recommend having a copy of your data monthly if you're actively working in that data. I mean, nightly is better, but probably not realistic. There is a nightly backup of your data at ASU, but having your own copy every month, which is just good practice as well. Frank, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to outline what we do here with the lichens. Basically, we have some big bulk terabyte or even larger terabyte hard drives, and we have a docking station. So at the imaging station, we basically have one hard drive in the computer where we dump all the photos on there. And then we use a docking station to keep mirrors. And there's a software called SyncBack, or there's other mirroring softwares that can keep these in mirrored. And then basically you have essentially the hard drive that's in your computer being mirrored to 2 alternate hard drives in the external docking station. And that means that if the hard drive in the computer fails, you can swap it easily against the one that you have as a backup. And so we always have 3 versions of everything, and that actually works fairly well. And I think hard drive space becomes really cheap these days, so it's not a huge investment. Of course, it depends on how many images you're capturing.
Yeah, and hard drives are prone to fail within 5 years, so you definitely need to. It's more like of a rolling option, and not like a stick it in there and don't look at it for a while.
Yeah, and also I personally I would not throw away the raw files, but because they're the raw data, and so I would keep them. But I mean, that's a decision that everyone has to make, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a future-proofing solution. It's like we don't know necessarily what they will be used for, but they store richer metadata about when and how this the image was created. So it does store some of that in just more pixels too. But that is definitely a institutional decision. Ed.
Yeah, I was just going to say the example that Frank gave of how he does it is commonly used, and I think a good way of doing it, and it creates multiple versions and stuff like that. The archival images, the DNGs or RAWs or however we do, our problem is we don't know what the future is going to hold. And if you're going to, let's say 5 years from now, a new technology comes up that requires the RAWs, you don't want to have to go back and redo all the images to get them back. The JPEGs, the large JPEGs, is usually what people have been using for research and doing like analysis and so forth, and machine learning stuff. It tends to be big enough. If you're, as far as the JPEGs, those images, if you're hosting your own, you should talk to your institution IT people. Because if they're lost and you do have the archival images, you could create those JPEGs again, but you also have to ask yourself, how much time is that going to take me? Can I do that in a day by just running a script for some software I have, or is it going to take me a week of work? So, so it's not only having this stuff, but also having to reinstall it is an issue. And the images that we host, we have backups of those images that go back to 30 days. And actually the Pacific Northwest is causing us to re-evaluate everything over again. And we're gonna actually put those images in cold storage too. But again, you know, if something happens, issuing that data is going to be a challenge too. As far as the data goes, if you're managing it live within a Symbiota portal, again, we archive that nightly or do a backup nightly, and we maintain those backups actually for years, at least the weekly backups, and those are going to be in cold storage too, so multiple places. However, I also stress, no matter how much you trust your IT people, it's always great to do your own little backups if you manage your live data. Don't really trust anyone, you know, more backups the better. So.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Allison again. Thanks for the input. It seems like there's the image storage is one thing, and then there's the data associated with the label, and that's a separate storage item. And yeah, we've kind of done a little scenario thing, like, okay, so under what conditions do we need those 60 megabyte DNG files? And I could see, like, if our building was destroyed and all our specimens, then that becomes the only specimen. But trying to anticipate what the new technology up front is going to need, yeah, I mean, it's hours and hours of work to redo the 80,000 specimen images, but we're also paying $1,000 or more a year to store those images, and they, like somebody pointed out, they may not be the file that is needed in 10 years. They may be some other thing that is needed. So anyway, these are what we're trying to grapple with, like, you know, how to store it, where to store it, what to store, and how often is, anyway, so I'd appreciate once the consensus is arrived at, some end user for people who don't understand this stuff very well, such as myself, to, like, just lay out, like, okay, you should do this, back up your data once a month and back up your images in multiple places and in this type of file. And so then it's a little bit more straightforward for me to be able to follow a correct procedure. Thanks.
Nico, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, this is those are very, I think, well-conceived comments, Allison. Not being a historian here, I can see where, when you're taking these very, very large images, and given that we're collections people, be nice to have them in the future for whatever purpose, right? I mean, I think that's how some of these things get started. But if, as you alluded to, 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, the use of the very, very large archival images just has not materialized, and at the same time, they are, adding additional costs to the overall management system, then I would say that good longer-term management will reevaluate whether the arguments that were made maybe 5 or 10 years ago about absolutely needing these archival images and in a certain way really still remain valid, or whether somehow the web-based images are really where more than 99% of the actual science happens and will continue to happen, right? And so I so all I'm saying is that because they have different managerial and also different financial sort of, at least for the Symbiota Support Hub, I think we can already say that for us to be providing services related to the web-based images is more feasible and is more scalable than the archival. So for the archival images in the longer term and beyond our current scope, we will also have to develop some sort of fee-based situation, right? And I just would encourage everybody to really have a second thought on how critical the archival images are to their science in the last so many years that they've had them, right? And if the answer is apparently not very critical, then I think that is actually empirical data that needs to be considered.
Brad, did you still have a comment or no?
Sure.
More?
I actually asked a related question to some people that deal with archival files at the university and said, you know, what should we be thinking about, future-proof, all this sort of stuff. And they said, you know, just keep in contact with those sorts of people at your institution or other institutions if there's not one there. And if, you know, a DNG is ever, they'll know when a new technology comes out and be like, you're no longer going to be able to read your own DNGs. We need to convert them all into this new format. You know, so just, they were just like, they're fine the way they're stored. Keep them if you have the space. Keep in contact with us so that we know if we have to like bulk convert all of your archival large DNGs into some new format to future proof them though. So, you know, they were just like, stay in touch. Things seem fine now. If you have the space, use it, you know, but definitely stay in touch so you don't miss some message that, hey, after 2025, you'll no longer be able to open any of your old files anymore, you know?
Yeah, digital archiving is a much bigger, as we've all realized, a much bigger can of worms than we perhaps initially thought when we started imaging all these specimens. And so being in contact with people who do this for a living, I think is really useful. Any other questions or comments relating to this or other? Scylla? Your connection keeps on going in and out, so I will open it up for other questions while that comes back. Any other questions, comments, topics, or things that you would like to see more documentation on regarding Symbiota portals?
I wanted to jump in just about the raw versus JPEG. It's easier to color correct, and because I notice a lot of institutions do have the color correcting card and the rulers. It's a lot easier to do that on raw versus JPEG. You can still do it on a JPEG, but it just makes, especially like with Adobe software, it's easier if you're using the raw versus the JPEG. So that's just in defense of saving the raw. I mean, potentially you could go ahead and color correct and, you know, add the ruler to everything and then discard the raw, but that's just something to consider.
Yeah, also to add to this, I know that it has been in the past recommended to do DNG files, but I increasingly see that most software these days uses original raw files. So Canon or Nikon or other raw files, and the DNGs was a great idea from Adobe, but it hasn't been universally accepted throughout the industry. And the funny thing is that actually, if you save the original raw, so like a NEF file or Canon CR2 or CR3, they often have algorithms that compress the data losslessly. And so they're often much smaller than the DNGs. And it is sometimes recommended that you embed the original raw file inside the DNG, and that also blows up the size of the file, because you basically have two files, two copies of both, and which is kind of a redundancy, which also adds up. So that is also something to consider. So I would personally recommend that you keep the original raw files and not the DNGs. But yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that too, that DNGs are not super widely used. So CR2s and NEFs seem, NEFs seem to be working just fine.
And one can use save either a CR2 or an F, or do you save?
No, it only is, if you have a Nikon camera, it will come out as a NEF, and if you have a Canon, it'll come out as a CR2.
And if it's a Sony, many people now use Sony. The new mirrorless Sonys, they are ARW, so that's again another raw file, but they're basically proprietary raw files. And the idea of Adobe was to introduce DNGs as an alternative, which is not proprietary, but that hasn't really been adopted much.
Although Brad makes a comment that his library will only take DNGs, not CR2s. So you probably want to check with wherever you're storing your images. You do run the risk of, if you're doing a CR2 or a NEF, if Nikon goes under, then your images go under too. So. All right, well, that's pretty much what we wanted to cover today, is open up the floor for discussion, for questions or ideas about Symbiota Support Group. And again, I know we kind of sprung this upon you, so if you have more ideas going forward, then we're happy to hear them. You can throw them into the GitHub discussions. And in fact, I think what I'm going to do is pop out and give you guys kind of a refresher of GitHub and GitHub discussions. So you do need to have a GitHub user account, and I just put a link to this repository in the chat. Repository or repo in GitHub is just another word that means a place where stuff happens, or a place where you deposit certain code or things like that. And so when you create an account in GitHub, then you're going to be able to search for repositories, and you'll want to find this Symbiota Docs repository. And that's where we do most of our interacting with all of you guys in the GitHub space. And so when you log in first, you'll be like, oh man, I'm not a coder. Why is there code on the first page? Don't worry about that. What you are going to want to pay attention to mostly are the issues here. So there's a tab up here that says issues, and then there's another tab that says discussions. So issues is a place where we document things that people have requested in terms of documentation or features, or if people have reported what they think is a bug with their code, then we'll document that here. If you have a feature idea that's kind of not necessarily completely fleshed out, it's not just like, hey, I would like this field to be longer. That's a pretty clear feature request. But if you have something that's more of an idea for a tool or for something that is not necessarily cut and dry, then we would really recommend that you put that in discussions. We can create issues out of discussions later on. But if you are just kind of floating an idea, or you'd like to hear some feedback or see if other people think it would be useful, then I would highly, highly recommend that you put a discussion in GitHub discussions. So to do that, you just have to be logged in. And then here on this discussions board, there are two discussions that are pinned here. So there's a welcome, and then there's a how to post to Symbiota support discussions. And you just basically create a new discussion, and then you decide what category it's in. So maybe you are having a problem. You can also email us with problems, that works too. If you have something that you'd like to go on the wish list, aka a feature request or something that you'd like to see, then you might want to categorize that as a wish list. Or if you've done something really cool with your portal, then feel free to show it off. You can show that off in the show and tell. If you're asking the community for help with something like, hey, where do I put this type of information? What field do I put that in? Or how do people keep track of, all of their additional identifiers, or something that the community might be more likely to respond to, or that multiple opinions would be really helpful for? I would recommend putting that in the Q&A. You can do polls, you can just generally chat about things, but once you just select one of these, then it's pretty much just like any old forum post. You put a title and then you put in whatever you want here. You can add links, you can add bullets. If you copy and paste, you can put images in there too. So if you could put screenshots, that's really helpful. And you can also attach files if that would be helpful for your discussion as well. So play with the discussions. They can be really useful to get some feedback from multiple people. And then if you have an issue, you can come in here and click new issue. And then you decide whether it's a bug. A bug is just something that's like broken or not working. Then you would select that. If you have a documentation request, so that's, hey, I would like to see a page for this in Symbiota Docs, or I'd like a training video for this. Then you can click on documentation request. And then feature request is suggesting some sort of new tool or function or a change to an existing function. And then once you click get started, it will have this little prefix already that's useful for us to keep there just so that we can categorize these feature requests or these issues as they come in. And then it will give you some questions about or some prompts for filling in some information that'll help us understand your request. So would recommend getting your GitHub account and finding this repository and plugging in that way. And yeah, Nadia asked if you can search discussions. So if you go into discussions, then there's a nice little search bar right here that will say, so if you're looking for other catalog numbers, then you could search for that and see what other people have asked. And that's a great point, Nadia, that maybe that question has already been asked, or maybe people already have weighed in or given some opinions on whatever you might be asking. So feel free to search the discussions for some community Q&A too. Nico, you have a comment?
Yeah, maybe it's a little corny, but starting off thank you, Katie, on the beginning where you had talked about us having had a good 2022. So I just wanted to say that, yeah, we've grown a lot, and we've also grown in the number of portals and the number of collections. And a lot of that, I think, has been active outreach, but also word of mouth. And we are trying to prepare ourselves here better and to even grow more. And so if you are happy enough with the services that the Symbiota Support Hub has been providing for you, and you want to encourage others to somehow try this out and join, feel very free. We're trying to get ready to grow more and to sort of manage that volume of usage. So we're working hard, but we have more capacity to grow, and we appreciate, endorsements that you give that oftentimes then, or at least then more frequently recently have resulted in people reaching out to us. Can you build us this portal? Can you do this? Can you do that? And in some cases they have funding. And so we're ready to be able to address those kinds of service requests, and it helps us overall, and it helps ultimately the entire Symbiota community because it's additional resources for us that we can then spread around. So so both thank you and please stick with us.
And tell your friends. Great. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and close for the day. Thanks again for joining us for this first January 2023 Symbiota support group. And you should be receiving an update about what the next topic will be, hopefully relatively soon. But if you have any suggestions, we are definitely open to them. So looking forward to another great year, and thanks for being part of the Symbiota family. Bye, everyone.